Hello and welcome to Brian Moore's Full Contact with the Telegraph. Well, we're past halfway in the 2026 Nations. Only one team remains in line for a Grand Slam, and who would have thought it, but it's France. And of course, England, who put Ireland to sort at Twickenham, still have a shout at the title. Going to be interesting. Eddie Jones said his side could have declared at half-time. I think it's a bit harsh, actually, but they were dominant. Meanwhile, Andy Farrell, the head coach of Ireland, admitted he needed to share most of the blame for a sloppy first half from his side. I'm not sure about that, but we'll discuss all that. We'll assess where England are going in the match against Wales in round 4, and we'll also get the thoughts from the former Ireland hooker Shane Byrne on what needed to change for the Irish when they take on Italy. I imagine quite a lot of the team will go. Next up, obviously, England have their old rivals Wales, who were beaten by a Sean Edwards-inspired France. They picked up their first win in Cardiff for 10 years. Can you believe that? It's now back-to-back defeats for Wayne Pivac, and we'll get the thoughts of the former Ospreys head coach Sean Holley on whether it will be 3 in a row when the Welsh head to Twickenham in 2 weeks' time. Plus, we'll be rounding up all the rest of the action, including Scotland's first win in the tournament, and we'll be answering all your questions too. Delighted to say that once again alongside me is the former England centre Tom May. Hello Tom, you're about to shortly depart on a long run, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm in a week's time. I am going to run 150 miles around London for the Teenage Cancer Trust and the Doddy Weir Foundation. It's 6 marathons in 6 days, and given I've not run one yet, it's quite some undertaking.
How can people support you?
So there's a Virgin Money giving page, which is /Tom May 150 once you go onto Virgin Money Giving. I set myself a target of 10 grand. I'm nearly at 13. Hoping to get to 20 by the time I finish it. So,
and I think there'll be a link in the show notes as well for
thank you very
those
much.
of you who want to help. Well, look, England 24, Ireland 12. Always a case. Ireland was so poor in the first half. It's difficult to see beyond that, but you do have to say England was sharp throughout, weren't they?
They were sharp, and you know, the individual performances I thought were fantastic. But that collective desire and their intensity in their defence, I think, really set the tone. And it continued through the game, didn't it?
That was an impressive thing. The line speed was there, evident right to the 80th minute. They were still trying to pile people down behind the gain line, weren't they?
And some of the stats around the dominant tackles were sort of off the charts. You know, some of the tackles they were making, everyone was putting Irish attackers on their backside and driving them backwards. You know, there was almost an element of ridding themselves of the frustrations of the previous couple of games. Clearly, the weather affected game in Edinburgh. Let's just you write that one off. I think in terms of a performance, because you can't.
We couldn't take anything out of that.
You can't take anything out of it. But I think now they'll be looking back at that first game. You know, there's a real disappointment that they didn't get more from.
Well, I wrote this in my Today's Telegraph article, and I said it may well be that England just started slowly, and that may well cost them the title. Unfortunately, because France, still have everything in their own hands, and it would be just one half of rugby. But this is why the Six Nations is difficult to win. Grand Slams. It's difficult to win back-to-back Grand Slams because you only need 20-odd minutes to go wrong, and that's it.
Well, I think also last time I was in, we were both saying, given it's the first one after a World Cup, there are so many changes that go through the different teams. There's periods of evolution that actually that's the difference, and it's turning out exactly that way.
Well, there were a lot of players out of position again. Joseph on the wing, Curry at 8 and Laws at 6, and they all had good games. I'm sorry, I still remain to be convinced that the thing is you could never tell what they would have been like had they been played in their ordinary positions with other people in their usual positions as subs. So in a way it's a moot point, but do you think it proves Jones has got wrong, or do you still have reservations?
I'm slightly reserved about the non-8 in an 8. Yep. I think that sort of remains to be seen. I think we're sort of getting away with it at the moment, but I think at the very top level, if we faced New Zealand in November with Tom Curry at 8, we'd become unstuck. I think the fact that England brought in Courtney Laws added physicality, and that's obviously why Eddie Jones. And
again,
they
had a 6-2 bench.
Yeah, they went 6-2. I think England are a very different team when they have no Vulupolas and no Manu Tuilagi. They've got no big carriers there.
Manu Tuilagi again. Thank goodness he came through the game and he was substituted, but he wasn't injured. You've played the same position. What does he bring?
I've played against him, and it was the most torrid. Well, I've played against him several times, but especially in that 13 channel. Okay, slightly different when he's in at 12 sometimes. But in that 13 channel, which is very difficult to defend, I built myself up for 5 days of just, right, I have to stop this guy. So you get up quickly, you get in his face. Made 8 tackles, and I thought, I'm doing pretty well here. Look, the old fellow was getting in the way of the man mountain. 9th tackle, I sort of got a bit of a fend and it sort of fell off. 10th tackle just straight over the top of me. 11th around me and scored. And then Jim Mallender held the board up. So it's one of those things where he just is relentless. And I was chatting to Tom Youngs about it yesterday, but before the Ireland game. I said, what's it like to play with him? Because actually, basically you can just give him the ball and he's going to threaten someone. Yeah. He can do you on the outside. He can run straight at you and over the top of you, or he can be a perfect decoy. Yeah. And I think he's evolved his game a bit like Nonu did for the All Blacks. He's got a lot more to his game now than he did a few years back, and I think he's a massive asset for England. Wales, they're up next. What do you reckon Jones will do? I mean, it's another home game. No real reason for substantial change, but I suppose it depends who comes available, who's on the injured list and who's not. Yeah, I think now that England have got a bit of wind in their sails, I think he'll probably stick with vastly the same team. You think he'll stick with 6-2 on the bench? I think he might do. Probably because everyone's going Willie. He just wants to do it just to, he seems to sort of quite like creating those different headlines. I suppose one of the things with England's backs, but given the selection policy he's had, Daly can play in 3 positions anyway. Joseph can. So you've got a lot of cover, haven't you? The specialists, 10 and, even 10 you could change now, can't you? Because Farrell's there. Yeah. So you need a scrum half and another utility. Yeah, and Slade's played fullback. Yeah, he's played 10. He's played in the centre. I think he's actually played on the wing for Exeter. So you've got and that's the best thing I think about England's backline is they've got experience of playing in different positions, and when you have that experience, your understanding about what the player inside and outside needs is completely different from someone that's just played one. Yes, and I think that's a real credit to those players, but it's a real tool that Eddie Jones can use. Well, we were talking earlier on about the England-Ireland game. Why don't we get an Irish perspective? Someone who has pulled on the green shirt a lot. He regular guest on the show. It's Shane Byrne, the former Ireland hooker. Hello, Shane.
How we doing, man?
All right, mate. Look, very disappointing from Ireland, but this was a point I've been making time and again. It wasn't just the execution. People can play badly, get kicks wrong, but I didn't understand quite a lot of things that Ireland were trying to do or not do. What did you make of the performance tactically?
Well, tactically, should I say, the first thing that they got wrong was it was very obvious what England were going to come out to do. It's a very successful plan that they've used, and it's just be ultra physical. And they should have known that was coming. They should have been able to match that at the very, very start. And I thought that their execution then started to go off. Now, unfortunately, a lot of it revolves around Johnny Sexton and his execution of the plan. But I just thought that once England got in among the team, that when there was no one to gather the team to go, look, we need to get A's and B done here very, very basically, very, very specifically. And the game started to slip, errors started to creep in. And, once that starts to happen, added to a very aggressive defence, you're at nothing.
Yeah, because I couldn't understand things like this. Ireland didn't compete on the first 4 lineouts. I mean, I don't understand why that is. I can't explain that. I can't explain why. They drive their own lineout ball when they're going for scores and they throw to the front so it's easy to use the touchline as a defensive, player. The deep ball to Bundyaki wasn't working. They did that 3 times. I simply, if I'd have been an Ireland fan, I'd have been bemused. And whilst Farrell is saying, I take a lot of responsibility, what about the role of the on-field leaders? Because they've got a lot of experience out there.
No, but see, that's the key. It's the on-field leaders where that sits at. It probably sits far less. You could say that Farrell, for some reason they weren't mentally prepared, because the most important moments in that game were the first 5-10 minutes. The collisions all involved in around then, because England needed to, and desperately needed to, make a statement very, very early in that game. They needed it for themselves because the Six Nations had been poor to that point. And Ireland should have known that that's what they needed to be ready for. Now, whether Farrell executed that correctly or not, we don't know. But definitely on the park, the decisions that were being made were poor. Even to what you're saying there, starting them all from the front of the line out, that wouldn't have been executed as part of a plan. That would have been just a call made on the pitch at that time. Yeah, I think Ireland would have found it difficult. Part of the plan would definitely have been to get the ball a lot wider than they could. So that's where the Bundyaki situation came in, because they weren't getting any success at getting the ball out wide. So they were just going for straight up runners. And, it was just absolute meat to the slaughter there. It really was, because once England were prepared to keep that aggressive defence going, Ireland were at nothing. And there was no sign whatsoever of anyone changing what was going on and grabbing the game by the scruff of the neck.
Shane, there was a lot of, comment made about Sexton after the game, but one area that selection has been questioned even prior to this tournament was in and around 9 and Conor Murray. Now, does this Italy game coming up next, does that give Farrell the perfect opportunity to make those changes, albeit hidden under the guise of, we're coming up against Italy, we know we're going to get a result, but now we can give an opportunity to the likes of John Cooney?
Yeah, no doubt. Cooney has to start. There's several players who would like to see starting now, and I think the difference should be, and we go through them, but the difference should be, I don't think Farrell should pretend that this is just, as would have happened anyway, rotating the squad going into the Italian game and then getting everyone back for the French game. I think he's got to make a statement that this isn't rotation. This is form players getting picked to start, and if they play well, they will be playing against France. Doris, Kelleher at hooker. You could also move the back 3. I think Stockdale has been very, very poor, particularly, in areas for that try and plenty of other things, unfortunately. I think you could, there's Addison at full back even, or as you could just bring Earls in and put Lamb, or, there's loads of changes that can be made. But I think that the key to it is the message that Farrell gives across here is that it's not just rotating the squad because it's Italy we're playing. This is singular, that it's because of what happened against England that changes need to be made.
Why do you think he needs to do that in particular, Shane? Why not just do it in a clandestine way? Why do you think the statement needs to be made?
Because the ripple effect, as well as anyone, is that safety in decisions, that if somebody is making an excuse for why you're not getting picked, well, then you've kind of a bit of safety in that. I think that half the problem is that it was the top 2 inches with the Irish team that were incorrect, and that, they need to refocus. And maybe a bit of, for regular starters, a bit of bench time or even not in the squad might refocus them. Listen, there's no doubt these players are still fantastic players. These guys still have a huge amount of rugby to give. But there is a young bunch coming up of players who are in superb form. And for varying different reasons, they haven't got a start. And I think they need to have a start now. And if they play well, if they grab the opportunity as it comes, they should stay there.
Well, I mean, they have the saying, don't they? Form is temporary, class is permanent. But class is no good if you're not on form. So we will see. It's great to speak to you, Shane. Thanks very much, mate.
Take care, guys.
Hello. Sorry to interrupt your podcast. I just wanted to take a quick moment to tell you about another programme from The Telegraph. I'm Ben Riley-Smith, the Daily Telegraph's US editor, and I've spent the last year exploring the scandal over links between Donald Trump and Russia for my new podcast, Crossfire. What I found was an extraordinary untold story that kept coming back to Britain.
The big gorilla in the room was, would Trump want to meet Putin? Would Putin then meet Trump?
And he said, and in any case, the Russians might use some material that they have on Clinton.
This is dangerous. This is really dangerous.
I've been tracking down those directly involved, from Washington to Cambridge to Belgravia, to try and find out what really happened and what it can tell us about this year's election.
So we're looking at the backdrop of Russia. We're looking at what they might be trying to do to our election.
Over 6 episodes, I will unpack it all, chunk by chunk, through the voices of those with direct knowledge.
Most people didn't even want to talk to me. I'm a guy getting death threats. I'm a guy whose life has been totally turned upside down.
I will tell you this, whoever it was, I hope they get punished for it.
That's in Crossfire, available now wherever you downloaded this podcast.
Tom, the only unbeaten side, who would have thought it? Well, actually, on an outside bet, France, but that's their first win in Cardiff in 10 years. And they were under the cosh in the second half. And I was particularly impressed by the way a pair of young, relatively inexperienced halfbacks kept them in the game, in terms of territory and so on, and did what they could with not very much ball and not very good ball.
Look, this is a French team this isn't the French team. France have only finished in the top half of the tournament, I think, once since 2010. And this is a side now that looks completely revolutionised. These guys, I was out at the under-21s or the under-20s tournament as it is now over the past couple of seasons. These guys have been coming through, and when we were out there commentating on those games, all of the guys that were looking at the French team, this lot are going to come through and cause the Six Nations and World Rugby some trouble. Looking forward to the next World Cup.
I mean, quite often the translation between the two is very difficult, but. Are you saying it was that apparent?
Yeah, I mean, they took teams to the cleaners with their physicality, the likes of Demba Bamba, who's had to go and learn his trade in Pro D2. Now he's playing back in one of the best teams in French League Rugby. And they're young players that are actually, to be fair, they're being given a consistent opportunity. Now, at 9 and 10 especially, over the years, France have chopped and changed, and it's been an absolute nightmare. And
it's not even the selection at 9 and 10. It's whether you've played a 9 at 10 or 10 at 9. I mean,
there is that. But I think look at Bouthier at fullback for a perfect example. That is a guy that has come through as a perfect plan out of development. He's played in Pro D2. He's come up through the ranks, and now he's playing at Montpellier. He's been picked. He's starting for them, and now he's tearing up on an international stage.
He's got a hell of a boot on him, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, my moment of the Six Nations still has to be that spiral against
95-metre kick. Yeah,
and I just think when we all know what it's like to go over to a French club side within European rugby, and the same on the international level. When the French get the wind in the sails and the fans get behind them, which I don't think they've been behind them for the past few years, they're very, very difficult to stop. And you can almost feel a wave inside the stadium that you're playing in that this is going to be an absolute nightmare to try and turn into a win from an opposition's perspective.
Well, Rob Vickerman told us in the studio a few weeks ago that he'd pick France for their home World Cup in 2023. Now, that's a bit precipitous given there's 4 years to go. But do you think this 23 coming up might be a chance for several of the Northern Hemisphere sides to stake better claims this time?
I think so. And look, how France lost that in the World Cup just gone in Japan, only they know. And I think should they have gone through that, then who knows what would have happened. But I think in typical French mentality, because it's at home, they'll all be all over it, won't they? They'll be so desperate to put on a good home performance in their own tournament, and I think they'll be in with a fantastic opportunity to do that with more and more experience that's come through from the young fellas. They would have developed even more. I think it's going to be exciting, especially if you're a French fan.
Well, France are looking the real deal. We've still got 2 rounds to go, but it's 2 losses in a row for Wayne Pivac, and next a tricky trip up to Twickenham. Why don't we speak about that to our guest, former head coach of the Ospreys and regular contributor Sean Holley's on the line. Hello, Sean.
Hello, Brian. Tom, how's it going?
Not too bad, mate. Look, what's the feeling about the Welsh at the moment in the public? Because it's 2 losses in a row, difficult trip to Twickenham, but they've achieved a lot. So what's the balance like of public mood?
I think, Brian, it's about 50-50. I think we've got the more discerning rugby punter who's aware that we're going through a bit of a change, a new coaching team, trying a few new players, a couple of injuries, and then you've got those diehards who just want to see Wales win, and to lose at home. We hadn't lost to France in 8 years, and to lose 2 in a row, they're raising some questions already. But I think the general feel, is that Wayne Pivac and his men need a little bit of time to bed in, and they're trying a slightly different style, a new defensive system, and it's going to take a little bit of time.
Well, Alan Wynne-Jones refused to accept the excuse that they were trying to bed it in. He was saying, fine about new styles and so on, but we've got to start winning again. But what about one of the areas Wales have had such strength for such a long time, and it's now looking as slightly questionable, is the long-term options at scrum half. Thomas Williams, Gareth Davis had a go, Rhys Webb probably now available for selection again. What's likely to happen there, do you think?
I think we're going to see the emergence of Thomas Williams a little bit more, right, to be honest. I think Gareth Davis was given a bit of a shot against France. Rhys Webb is struggling with the fact that he's not able to play any club rugby at the moment, so he's shorn of any sort of game time. But Thomas Williams is seen as somebody who is definitely one for the future, and played pretty well in a Welsh shirt so far. So I think we'll see Thomas Williams play against England, possibly against Scotland. We maybe see Rhys Webb get a bit of a run in the last game, but we've got some real good young talent in Wales as well in and around that. Look out for young Harry Morgan, who was within the 20s last summer. He's one at the Ospreys that will come through injured at the moment, but we've always got good halfbacks, but Thomas Williams is the next one off the ramp.
Sean, from a coaching perspective, there's a couple of teams, or there's more than a couple of teams in this tournament that are really trying to evolve their style of play. Tell us what it's like as a coach. Do you know how long it's going to take to get that team from point A to point B, and how much sort of leeway do you give your team when you're trying to go through that process?
Oh, hi Tom. It's a tough question, that one. I think the problem Wayne's got is we saw the most experienced Six Nations team ever grace the field at the stadium on Saturday, and when you're trying to evolve and make slight changes, and you've got guys in the squad with so many caps that are used to a certain way of playing, attacking and defending, that has been really successful under Warren Gatland and Sean Edwards in particular, then they may raise a few eyebrows in the early stages if it's not working. But I think as a coach, as you asked, you've got to stick by your guns and your philosophy and evolve your game. And Wales have, in the last 10 years, got to a point where they've been really successful, but to a point, we're still not beating New Zealand, we're still not beating England regularly, as we saw now on the weekend, France. So I think it's got to be a case of sticking to your philosophy and evolving players through the system that are eventually going to play the style of rugby that you want to. A big concern at the moment is that we're conceding points quite cheaply, and we gifted France a lot of their points as well as France played. If you look at the stats, Wales won all the statistical battles in all aspects of the game apart from the scoreboard. And that's going to be a real concern for Wayne Pivac in the short term.
One of the things that I've always felt, if you have a selection, which you do at the back with Lee Halfpenny, brilliant. He's got a brilliant aerial capability, great goal kicker, but nowhere near the threat of someone like Liam Williams to open you up. And given the role that fullbacks now have to play, I just wonder if you felt that there might be room for change there.
Yeah, I think so. I think Liam Williams, Bray, had he been fit, would have played. And it was a big aspect of the game on the weekend. Wales kicked the ball a lot. In fact, there were 79 kicks in the game, and France kicked 40 of them. But Wales persisted with kicking from their own sort of half and long down the field. And France were waiting for them. 3, 4, 5 players. Gregory Aldrit had a field day in the backfield. They ran it back. Wales got narrow, and that's where France really got some meters in the wider channel. So I totally agree with you. There were opportunities to counter-attack, but for some reason the kicking game was very, very evident on the weekend. But with Liam Williams, and even the likes of Johnny McNichol, who can play 15, there you'd have a much more counter-attacking option, and I think we'd see a slightly different Wales then.
Sean, just finally, when it comes to the challenge at Twickenham, England have only lost 7 games out of the last 51 in the Six Nations at Twickenham, and that's how difficult a challenge it is. What in particular do you think Wales have to do to register a win?
Well, that's $1 million question. It's not a great time to go to Twickenham off a back of 2 defeats, and conversely, I think England has sort of got their mojo back. I always feel with England, if they just stick to what they're good at, bringing their big forwards into play, a little bit of interplay between Ford and Farrell, threatening around the ruck, using their scrum and their maul, then more sides are going to really struggle. And that's really the recipe to beat Wales again. As far as Wales are concerned, they need to get their spacings right in defence, come off the line and make those big tackles on your crews. Told you for Courtney Laws was brilliant on the weekend. They have to stop those on the gain line, starve them of any sort of go forward, because once England get into the 22, they're very, very clinical one way or another. So that's what they have to do, and they have to take the game to the last 10, 15 minutes within a score, because that's when maybe England get a bit vulnerable, a bit twitchy, and the crowd gets a bit twitchy, and that's where Wales have been successful in the past. It's taken it right to the death, but it's easier said than done, isn't it? So, that'll be the recipe, and that's what they'll work on, but they're a long way from that at the moment, I think.
Well, Sean, we will see. But mate, it's always great to speak to you, and thank you very much.
Great. See you in a couple of weeks, Bri.
Thanks, mate. Tom, Scotland first winning the competition in what was a very in fact, I've forgotten it. very forgettable game. This brings up another point, which is intertwined with the questions. There's one from Graham Fradd. How do you solve a problem like Azzurri? They haven't registered a point in 2 of the games. They haven't won a Six Nations game in 5 years. He said, I don't believe they've registered a championship point since the bonus system came in. Now, you've got to. I don't say feel sorry for them. The problem is everyone else is developing and spending money as well. I think the problem is, however much affection you have for the Italian way of life, food, Rome, and all these things, at some point you've got to be hard-headed about this. And given the fact that I firmly believe there should be an automatic qualification into the Six Nations in some respect, in some way, the case is getting less and less easy to make for them. What do you think will happen with them?
I think eventually you're right. There will be an entry point for one of the other teams to say, right, this is your game, whether it's a playoff or whether it's straight up and down relegation and promotion from the tier down. I think it's 25 games now that they haven't won a game, and they look further and further from winning a game in this competition. They are evolving, but they're not evolving at anywhere near the rate that these other teams are moving their abilities within the game on. I think that. How you prepare when you're in I know I was at London Welsh and we got smashed every week, and it was a bit like, you're trying to get up for a game and trying to, make players believe that you can win when actually in the back of your mind, you've got no chance. There's only so much pride you can rely on. There's only so much of, drum banging that you can do to try and get a side.
Back to the wall speeches work twice, don't they?
Yeah, and then it's like, I thought you said that a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. Look, I think they are getting better if you look at them and separate them from the other teams in the competition, but they are nowhere near capable enough at the moment.
And Scotland, it was a win, but it wasn't that convincing, was it, really?
Well, they blew so many chances.
Yeah.
The mistakes that they made, whether it be individually or collectively. I think Hastings, if he wants to step up and be a number 110 and kick goals, you've got to hit you got to hit top rank on your goal kicking, and he was off there. Good to see Stuart Hogg, I think, make that Hogg-esque break from 50 metres out and score the try. He's come in for some pretty unfair flack, I think, over the past couple of weeks. And Hamish Watson is one of the best players in the tournament. I think, for his stature, he punches way above his weight. He does very, very effective contributions all around the field in every aspect of the game, and I think that's probably a bonus for Scotland. He was a positive from that perspective.
We seem to be back, unfortunately, for Scottish fans in the same position we were several years ago, and for many decades prior to that, where Scotland can win ball, they can get it going forward, just like the cutting edge. And I thought at one point, say, maybe a couple of years ago, they were getting to a point where they actually had enough attacking options to make that no longer true, and that they could translate the chances that came their way. But it looks to me at the moment as though they've gone backwards in that respect.
Yeah, they do create opportunities, and they have the players to be able to put themselves in the right positions to make scores. I think if you look at the centres that they've got in Hugh Jones, Sam Johnson, Chris Harris, that they have been the focus of Gregor Townsend's attention. There's one player there who came on at the weekend in Rory Hutchinson that I think should be given a prolonged stay in that team. If you look at the way he's performed for Northampton over the past couple of seasons, he's got something different. He has an ability to make something out of nothing, and that's what they need to create more and more often. So they can actually, if you're not going to put one of these away, then you might get another opportunity further in the game with a player like that. So all of those teams are trying to up the rate that they are precise in and around their execution of the opportunities they're presented with. And Scotland at the moment, that they don't tick those boxes.
Well, why don't we go to some of the questions here? One for Paul Southern. Clear outs at rucks. They've got to be penalised before someone gets seriously injured. The same as high tackles, but actually the consequences can be far worse.
Fully agree.
I saw several at the weekend against Ireland.
James Ryan
and Tona, one on Itoji's knee, which was a purposeful one, and I'm amazed he didn't even look at them. And we haven't even talked about the potential penalty try with Tom May. It wasn't that he hadn't taken off. It wasn't even the picture when he kicked it.
Yeah,
can you explain why they have a prolonged investigation into two guys wrestling and taking each other's shirts off? at the bottom of the bottom of and then you've got a penalty try opportunity, and they never even review it.
I know that was ridiculous. I think they should definitely have gone back for that. I wonder if they'll be citing repercussions. We don't know. But when you're off your feet and you're in a vulnerable position, to have someone like that, let's not forget, these lads they're powerful and they're big,
18 stone.
And if you've got that hitting you with a bit of intent, because all of those were with intent, I think testament to Tom Curry, just got back on his feet after having been steamrolled by James Ryan. I fully agree with Paul.
One from the great Mike Colson. I don't know if you know Mike. He's a brilliant NFL American sports guru. Soon after Genge came on, he drew an Irish penalty by standing up and driving to his right. A few minutes later, he did the same thing and was penalised. Can any living human being explain the difference? Well, Mike, it's like this. The reason why Genge was going to his right was the Irish tight head who came on the reserve changed his mind, and he got onto his shoulder, which he's not supposed to do. And on the first one, he twisted him in, which is why he went right. And the second, it was the other way around, Mike, actually. He got a penalty against him first for being dragged in right. And the second time, what he did, when he realised he was being dragged in right, he simply rammed the shoulder up of his opposite number. And that's when the shoulder shot out. And that's when they got the penalty. So they're both illegal. It was just on the first one. He didn't take that option on the second one. Look, Mike, the thing is this. No living human being can explain how referees referee the scrum, because none of them have got any experience. And they just guess. It's as simple as that, Mike. They just guess. Last question from Still Here. I don't think that's his real name. If it is, it's a very, very strange adopted name. Sexton, time for Ireland to move on. Not that he's a finished player, but maybe he's holding back good younger players from the national team.
Listen, I think Johnny Sexton has had a tough few weeks. There's obviously added responsibility in his role as captain, and some are saying maybe that responsibility is affecting his performances. But I think there comes a point, and I don't think Joey Carberry's fit at the moment, is he?
Well, no, he's not. No, he's not.
And I think Andy Farrell would seriously be looking at maybe having a change in and around 10 if he was fit, because I think he's an outstanding player that can.
He seems to have chronic problems, though, unfortunately, Carberry.
He does,
He keeps breaking down, so difficult, isn't it?
I think it's very difficult to say Johnny Sexton's over the hill and out the door, but over the past few weeks, certainly 9 and 10 need to be looking over their shoulders somewhat.
Tom, what about the general level of chat in this Six Nations? I'm getting sick of it. Every player is moaning about every decision. They've not got the right to do that. Even the captains haven't got the right to do that. And I understand referees wanting to have a relationship with players about that. But at the end, they're in charge.
I fully agree. Dan Bigger at the weekend was...
Well, not just Bigger. Farrell.
No.
Farrell, his comment after he held on to Stander was, that's a ridiculous decision. Now, why didn't the referee just... if I'd have been referee, that would have been a card.
Yeah.
This does not set a good example.
Well, there's only one way to stamp it out, isn't there? Next time someone does it, show them a card. Then let's see how many people.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of flack aimed at all of the TMOs, the assistant referees. Look at Wales with the deliberate or not deliberate slap down from Willemse. It's difficult. Now, one of the things that isn't difficult is just flat out petulance. Don't speak to the referee like that. That's one of the things that we're
talking about Mike Carlson in the NFL. They don't do that in the NFL. And you're talking about a professional game with huge players and huge money at stake, and just as much pride, just as much physical intensity. They don't do it because they know they can't get away with it, and they won't. What
are the repercussions in the NFL if they?
Well, they just throw them out of the game.
Right.
Or they give unsporting conduct 15 yards forward.
It's just straight.
Same like the marching people 10.
Well, and if
it only need a couple of 10-metre yards, it's beyond me. Referees then talk about the difficulty of this, that, and the other. Players will get away with anything they can. They'll manipulate referees in any way they can, and referees have to understand this.
Well, if you stand up to it and you act upon it, it'd be the same in football, but no one ever wants to do it. That's another story. But I think look, if they had a review this week and they've got some time because they've got the week off. They haven't got the week off, but the week off from refereeing. Then they could bring that in next week. Right, anyone that talks to a referee like that, give them a card. Set that example. You wouldn't see it the week later.
And funnily enough, now they've actually done something, and they have, to their credit, they have done something about delays. They use it. It's getting they're actually using it properly, aren't they? They're getting away much quicker, as we said they would do and could do. So it proves it works. Now they've just got to sort out these interminable, committee meetings before every line out. There's not in the book. Everyone's taking an age to get there. There's no reason why they have to do that.
Well, and also you spent half your week doing as many you know exactly what's going on.
Exactly.
Why do you need to have a mothers' meeting before each one?
Quite right. So there you are, officials. You've done one thing. Let's do the other two things. Let's get on with it. Sorry, that's all we have time for this week on Brian Moore's Full Contact with the Telegraph. Thank you to my co-host Tom May. Tom, good luck in your charity run. I don't envy you in the slightest. I'll be back every Monday evening during the Six Nations from all the usual places you get your podcast from. If you enjoy this episode or any of our previous episodes, please do subscribe, and we'll catch you next week. For now, it's goodbye.